Thank you so much for coming. As you can see, this session will be recorded, so if you are not comfortable with being recorded, please turn your cameras off. If you are still not comfortable being recorded, even without a camera, please, you do have the option to leave the room and watch the recording once it has been posted online. Welcome all of you to our seminar on how the data revolution has transformed the UNCCD national reporting process. Next slide. Nope, we can't see the next slide. All right, yeah, I'm Lena Moral. I am in charge of stakeholder engagement at GEO-LDN. So just some housekeeping rules. If you have a question, use the chat box for the moderator to note it. Please mute all of your microphones. Background noise can make it very difficult for the speakers to stay on track and to make sure everyone can hear you. Of course, when we do our Q&A session, you are more than welcome to unmute and talk to us. Please raise your hand when you want to speak. That makes it easy for us to then be able to choose people to speak in order. And if possible, please switch on your camera only during the Q&A phase. Otherwise, please feel free to keep your cameras off. A quick agenda for today. Very short welcome and intro from myself. Then the big event we've all been waiting for will be how the data revolution has transformed the UNCCD national reporting process by Brian O'Connor and Sarah Manelli, both working at the UNCCD. Then we will have a Q&A session where the floor is open to all of you to ask the questions that you are interested in, and some final concluding remarks. First of all, I would like to show a big welcome to our speakers for today. We have, first of all, Brian O'Connor, the Spatial Data Specialist at the Science, Technology and Innovation Unit at the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. He's not only GIS and remote sensing expert, but he also focuses on GIS, on spatial modeling and land cover, land use, habitat mapping, biodiversity threats, essential biodiversity variables, as well as much more. And he oversees the use of geospatial data tools and technologies in the national reporting process. So he's an invaluable guest that we have today. Then alongside Brian O'Connor, we have Sarah Manelli, who is not just the UNCCD focal point for SDG Indicator 15.3.1, which focuses on land degradation neutrality, as well as the focal point for the Group on Earth Observations and Land Degradation Neutrality, which I am a part of, but she also has worked on the interface between science and policy and the field of sustainable land management for over 15 years. She's the program officer in the Science, Technology and Innovation Unit at the UNCCD. So we have two very invaluable guests here joining us today. So also an introduction to the seminars in general. Each seminar is also here to support countries, individuals, land use planners, GIS experts in order to find the best tools necessary in order to be able to execute the different phases of land use planning, from geospatial data to planners and decision makers. Today, we will be talking about the national reporting process. And so I'd like you to quickly tell me in the chat. Hopefully you have access to the chat. If you don't during the Q&A, you can let us know if there is a specific tool that you use in preparation for or for the UNCCD reporting. Apart from the praise platform itself, is there any tool that you use that would be that you feel like you use for the UNCCD reporting? So feel free to put your answers in the chat, or you can also share with us in the Q&A as we learn more about that. I will give you a second or two to put that in the chat as we get ready for Sarah and Brian's input. I think we can, yep, we can go straight to Sarah and Brian's input. Okay, so we will be switching PowerPoints now for, in order to get Sarah and Brian for them to start their talk. Please do bear with us for a second. I still see no tools in the chat box. I really wish that someone would say something, but maybe I'm asking a very silly question and you all just use a very basic trends.earth and the praise platform, so. But I'm hoping you prove me wrong and let me know that there are certain tools or methodologies you use. All right, yep, we can, yeah. I will now hand over to Sarah first. Perfect. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Lena. I will get this started. I would like, first of all, to thank you and the GEO-LDN Secretariat for organizing this seminar and for giving us the opportunity to present the progress we have made in the last few years and where we've got now in this long reporting journey at the UNCCD. Before I get started, as I'm not, I don't know exactly who is in the audience, let me clarify, say a couple of words on the convention. The UNCCD, for those of you who are not familiar with it, was established in 1994. In fact, next year we will be celebrating its 30th anniversary. It's one of the 3 Rio Convention, and it is the sole legally binding international agreement, which was set up to address desertification, land degradation, and the effects of drought. It was set up to protect and restore our land and to ensure a more sustainable future. As of today, it has 197 parties, out of which 196 countries and the European Union. If we could move on to the next slide. Today, we will explore how the national reporting has drastically evolved over these 3 decades. And if we go to the next again, and the national reporting is indeed an indispensable tool to bring forward effective planning and implementation of the convention. In fact, country parties are actually required to report on measures undertaken to implement the convention under Article 26. It's embedded in the convention itself, this requirement, even though there is some flexibility. Since 2018, the national reporting process has been monitoring progress towards 5 strategic objectives, which are contained in the UNCCD 2018-2030 strategic framework. And in addition, the UNCCD reporting process also contributes to the follow-up of progress in implementing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. In fact, as custodian agency for SDG Indicator 15.3.1, which is the proportion of land that is degraded over total land area, the UNCCD Secretariat has a duty to collect, through the national reporting process, information on this indicator and then to report country estimates to the United Nations Statistics Division in New York. If we move to the next slide, this gives you a very quick overview of the indicators which are currently used to measure progress towards the 5 strategic objectives. We have a set of 17 indicators. Under strategic objective 1, we also have SDG indicator 15.3.1. And I think it's important, given our host, the GEO-LDN, it's important to notice that Earth observation and geospatial information are currently used to produce 7 of these 17 indicators, and there is potential actually for more. The next slide. So this, the next slide gives you an overview of this long reporting journey. From 1999, when we had the first UNCCD reporting process, all the way to 2008, we only reporting was only done in a narrative form. It was only with the adoption of the 2018 strategy that the UNCCD started using an indicator-based reporting system. Initially, we were focusing on a set of performance indicators, which were used to track progress towards the operational objectives of the convention. With time, then in 2012, we also started using impact indicators to track progress towards the strategic objectives, to try and measure the impact on the ground. But the initial results, as I will show later, were far too heterogeneous to draw any conclusion on the status of the land. So the real turning point was the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in 2015. Until then, the convention had really suffered from the lack of a clear overarching goal and the lack of an internationally agreed methodology to monitor land degradation. SDG Indicator, to monitor land degradation. In fact, there was a survey which was conducted in 2009, and this survey revealed that over 1,000 different and unique indicators were at that time in use in the countries to track progress towards the strategic objectives. So there was no clear, no standardized approach of any kind. Then with the adoption of the SDG and the adoption of land degradation neutrality as the target for sustainable development, this adoption has generated really momentum for the adoption of an internationally agreed methodology to estimate and monitor land degradation. With the adoption of the new strategy then in 2018, we have got the first reporting process, which helped establish a land degradation baseline using this internationally agreed methodology. And finally, next year in 2022, for the first time in the history of the convention, in this 30 years of history, we have been able to assess changes over time in land degradation based on information reported by the countries. If we move to the next slide, to give you a bit of a more in-depth look of how these reporting procedures have evolved. As I mentioned, initially reporting was done only in a narrative form. So we were gathering mostly qualitative, unstructured information in a non-standardized format. Then over time, over this long period of time, we've moved towards gathering mostly quantitative, standardized information, including geospatial information, which is now fully centralized in a relational database. But this journey from 1999 to 2022 certainly was not a linear one. Just to make one example, in 2010, that's when we introduced PRAISE, the Performance Review and Assessment of the Implementation System, our reporting platform. And in 2010, this was an online platform. However, countries were not yet ready for this type of reporting. Many experienced connectivity issues, and many at the following COP asked us for a more user-friendly and offline reporting template. So in 2018 and 2014 and 18, we moved away from this online reporting platform, and we used instead PDF fillable form. Until in the last few years, and then in 2022, we used for the first time PRAISE 4 at its fourth iteration, which is really the first of its kind to enable digital, online, and data-driven reporting. And this time, I think it was pretty well received by country parties. We had a good reporting rate with the 126 country reporting, and very positive comment at the recently concluded session of the Committee for the Review of the Implementation of the Convention. I will bring this up later. The next slide. This is another example of how the reporting template, in this case, the land cover reporting template, evolved in a non-linear manner over time. In 2012, we have a quantitative but not fully standardized form. And this gave a heterogeneous result. We had 300 unique land cover classes reported by about 50 countries. So this information was very hardly comparable. And therefore, in 2018, we moved to a standardized format, and we asked all country parties to report using 7 very broad land cover classes, which were based on the 6 IPCC land use categories. This standardized approach certainly helped improving comparability, but was not as well received by country. They wanted to have more flexibility and the possibility to expand the classes to better reflect the national circumstances, the national reality. So in 2022, countries were given then the option to report using a national land cover legend, but we asked countries to specify how these national land cover classes could be aggregated into the 7 default classes. So we had to find the right balance between comparability on one side and country ownership on the other side. And this is quite difficult to achieve when you have a fixed data entry form. So with PRAISE4, we have been able to design a dynamic reporting form for land cover that reacts on the fly to a user-defined land cover legend. If we move to the next section of the presentation, and again to the next slide, please. As I mentioned before, the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was a watershed moment, as basically it explicitly recognized the value of a range of different data, including Earth observation data, for tracking progress. Sorry, we need to move to the next. We went back to the previous slide. If you could move to the following one. I don't see the right slide.
It seems like we're having an issue with the slide. We're getting it up right away right now. Is this the correct slide or is it the next one,
No,
Sarah?
we should be going to slide 10.
This one? This one?
The following one.
The following one.
So this, I was just saying, as the SDG was really a turning point for national reporting. And now looking more closely at our indicator, the one we are custodian for, SDG Indicator 15.3.1 went from the lowest tier in the SDG Indicator framework to the highest tier, the tier 1, in less than 3 years. The key enabler behind this success was really the use of free and open Earth observation data, which were provided as default by all countries, and that greatly facilitated national reporting. In terms of the methodology that we are using, since site degradation is highly context specific, rather than using a comprehensive approach, this methodology uses really an indicative approach that is based on 3 essential variables: land cover, land productivity, and soil organic carbon. These were chosen to reflect the ecosystem services that flow from the land-based natural capital, which is what we want to maintain through land degradation neutrality interventions. And basically, any significant reduction or negative change in any of these 3 sub-indicators is considered to comprise land degradation. This is, in a nutshell, the methodology we are using. Is this one-out, all-out rule that is used to aggregate the 3 sub-indicators and estimate the proportion of degraded land. If you move to the next slide, please. For those who want to learn a bit more, the methodology to compute SDG 15.3.1 is fully documented in version 2 of the Good Practice Guidance, which was published in 2021, and which also encompasses a minimum data quality standards for reporting, which were developed in close collaboration with the Group on Earth Observation Land Degradation Neutrality Initiatives. On this slide, you also have other good practice guidance documents, which were developed to support reporting on other indicators, for instance, those related to drought, and still part of our indicator framework. To the next slide, please. There were also some key decisions which were made by country parties at the UNCCD Conference of the Parties. and which really enabled a data-driven innovation in reporting. The first and perhaps the most important one is this decision 22, which was taken in COP11, and which requested the Secretariat, which requested us to provide country parties with default estimates, default data sets derived from global data sources for national reporting, to facilitate national reporting through PRAISE. The same decision also then requested country parties to subsequently verify or eventually replace these default data sets with data which were sourced or computed nationally to ensure that the reporting process remains country-owned. And then there were other notable decisions which requested the Secretariat to make the reported data as accessible as possible and in interactive formats. And so we will see later in the presentation how these decisions were implemented. Another key decision, thank you for the change, was decision 9 COP13, which invited the group on Earth observation and which basically helped us mobilize the entire Earth observation community to assist countries in fulfilling their reporting obligation for SDG Indicator 15.3.1 by fostering data access, national capacity building, and the development of standards and protocol. This is the decision that led to the establishment of the GEO Land Degradation Neutrality Initiative in 2018. So an initiative that really has a unique policy mandate under the GEO umbrella, and eventually to its upgrade to a flagship initiative in 2022. If we move to the next slide, I would like to show you where we are now in terms of land degradation neutrality targets. As of today, the target setting program that we have spearheaded under the UNCCD has supported a total of 131 participating countries. And out of these, 109 countries have successfully completed the process of setting voluntary targets. Based on an assessment which was run by PBL in 2020, it was estimated that countries have committed to restore over 450 million hectares of degraded land through the land degradation neutrality target setting program alone. And this is out of a global total of 1 billion hectares, which were committed to restoration under other Rio Convention, for example, or under the Bond Challenge. Next slide. Now, this really gives you a quick overview of what we were able to estimate through the reported data, at least for SDG 15.3.1. Obviously, there is much more because it's only one indicator. But as of 2019, we have estimated that 15.5% of the reported land area was degraded. 2019 is the last year for which comprehensive data is available. So that's what we were able to achieve, to measure so far. And we have also estimated that between 2015 and 2019, at least 1 million hectares of healthy and productive land were degraded every year. So if land degradation continues at a similar rate, we could expect that 1.5 billion hectares will be degraded by 2030, and therefore that both halting new land degradation and accelerating the existing commitments to restore 1 billion hectares will be necessary to achieve and ideally surpass this neutrality target. The next slide, thank you. Aside from being able to tell the world about this worsening land degradation crisis, the data-driven approach has also allowed us to improve how we disseminate, how we analyze, and how we disseminate the results of the reporting process. First of all, we have a relational database in place, and therefore we can now more easily produce an analysis, produce reports of the reported data, summarizing regional and global status and trends in the indicator. We can do this in a much more efficient and transparent manner compared to the past. And this is, you see that beautiful logo up there is the CRIC 21. This is the recently concluded session of the Committee for the Review of the Implementation of the Convention, which was held for the first time in Samarkand, Uzbekistan. And it was really a different session from the past. For the first time, country parties were able to discuss land degradation status and trends with some data, with some evidence in their hands, and they were able to share national and regional experiences in this regard. It was completely different level of discussion compared to previous session. If we move to the next slide, with the launch of the UNCCD data dashboard that my colleague Brian will present very shortly, we have also been able to reach a much larger public compared to the past when we only had official documents. And despite the difficult global media context, we have been able to secure 620 pieces of print media coverage across all the region, reaching what was estimated at 780 million people. This was just after the launch of the data dashboard. And if we move to the next slide, the data from our dashboard was also recently featured in an editorial of the journal Nature, with a focus on the widespread impacts of land degradation. And this is unprecedented. We have never had this kind of media exposure for our work. We think it's truly transformational and impactful for the convention. With this, I will stop here and give the floor to my colleague Brian to present about the reporting tools in more details, and then also what's on the horizon for national reporting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and good afternoon and good morning to everyone. It's my pleasure to present on behalf of the UNCCD at this seminar. I'd just like to say I'm presenting on behalf of a wider team here, of course, and at the Secretariat, we really stand on the shoulders of giants. We've got a great set of developers and data experts, and thank you all very much for your contributions. So just like to acknowledge that. So as Sarah mentioned, I'll present an overview of the reporting tools, our vision for a future reporting system, and mention some of the challenges that lie ahead. So as Sarah mentioned, one of the most significant responses to the COP decisions has been to transform our praise platform from what was a basic website just to upload national reports to a database-driven online reporting platform that's built on open geospatial technology and software. So what countries find when they log into Praise4 is that all their national reporting spaces have been pre-filled with default data taken from the best available and global open data sets. In fact, countries have access to over 70 raster layers describing land cover, productivity, soil carbon, drought, population exposure to land degradation and drought through time. Now, this is not only a valuable resource for national reporting, but they can also use it for a wide range of related applications, including capacity building. So geospatial tools and praise, now you can keep on the same slide, please. So geospatial tools and praise also allow the countries to create maps from these data sets and other geographical information, such as vector features to enhance the default data and to enrich the national report. In addition, there are management tools which allow the countries to completely replace the default data with their own national data. And also just to mention that Praise offers a secure space as it is only accessible to national reporting officers and their delegated users through this login page. Next slide, please. So Praise should not be seen in isolation, but at the center of a wider reporting infrastructure. So in fact, our vision at the Secretariat is very much for a federated system of interoperable software and tools around Praise. So this approach would ideally allow countries to use a range of tools to prepare their data sets before importing them to their national report. And we are working on this vision with the GEO-LDN team and with other partners in the context of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. So we think in the 2022 reporting process that we have actually successfully implemented this vision with our partners at Conservation International, at least a part of it. The interoperable features that we built between their Trends.Earth software and Praise4 were a great success and widely welcomed by countries. And we would now like to emulate that model for other tools in future reporting processes. Next slide, please. However, Praise is just one side of the coin. On the other side, we have a new data dashboard developed with funding support from the GEF. And there's an animation on your screen now, which is just briefly going through the home page. So it displays the results of the 2022 reporting process in an interactive and easily digestible format through a range of data visualization features. So on the home page of the dashboard, you can find key numbers about land degradation, drought, and many other key topics under our mandate. When you click on one of the topic cards on the home page, you're given access to global, regional, and national information compiled from the submitted reports. And with this dashboard, and as Sarah already mentioned, we're now reaching a much broader audience in the media and the general public. So next slide, please. So we don't have time today to go through all the details of the dashboard, but I'll give you a quick run through of the main ones. So firstly, we have an area comparator tool, which allows the users to convert the area-based numbers into simpler to understand units, such as football fields or the size of a chosen country. So for example, 1.52 billion hectares of degraded land can be a rather difficult number to visualize. But when we see it in terms of other land-based units, such as football field area or the size of a selected country, it can be more relatable to the average user. So next slide, please. So thank you. On the dashboard, we also have chloropleth maps for each indicator, showing the value of the indicator per country. And when we have 2 or more time periods, we have slider features to allow the user to compare the values. So here is an example for SDG 15.3.1 for the baseline 2015 and the latest reporting period 2019. Next slide, please. So again, here on this slide, you were seeing a series of chloropleth maps showing the proportion of the total land area under drought per country, summarized in 4-year periods from 2000 to 2019. Next slide. So we also have symbology-based maps and other forms of visualizations to demonstrate how the reported data may or may not be connected. So in this slide, you're seeing an example of the connections between biodiversity status and land degradation indicators. In this case, we've represented them as bubble maps and charts. Next slide, please. And finally, we have a country profile section. So you can choose a country from the homepage that you'd like to see. And then you can see their key maps and headline statistics from their submitted national report. And also just to mention that the full national reports in PDF format can still always be obtained from our homepage on our website. The link to that is at the bottom of this slide. And that's both current reporting process and previous ones. And you can also go straight to the country profile page in the dashboard to download the national report. Next slide, please. Now, Praise and the dashboard are not the only tools that we've been working on. So we've worked with our colleagues in the global mechanism here at the Secretariat to also build a tool to better manage the LDN targets set by countries. So managing targets set by countries through different submission processes, the LDN target setting program, there's the reporting 2018, reporting in 2022, and there's different formats of those submissions. So actually it's quite a difficult knowledge management task and information flow task. And with this LDN query tool, for the first time, we've been able to bring all the targets under SO1, Strategic Objective 1, and the Land Degradation Neutrality TSP program into one place, and the targets are now synchronized with the Praise4 reporting database. So essentially, we now have one single source of LDN target information. This means our staff can use the tool to search for targets. Now you can stay on the same slide. Thank you. So staff can now use the tool to search for targets and filter them by country, provenance, the type of targeted action, and many other filter criteria. They can also use this tool to perform quality assurance processes on the submitted targets. Next slide. Thank you. So basically, just to summarize what I've said in the last few minutes. So in terms of indicators, our reported data are now queryable, they're accessible, they're secure in a database. Information is accessible in interactive formats. We're able to reach a much broader audience than just our country parties, for example, the media. And we see we're achieving much greater impact in our work. Geospatial technology is at the heart of this. I think good evidence of that is Sarah's mentioned that the SDG Indicator 15.3.1 has been promoted to Tier 1, which is the highest level in the SDG framework. In terms of the targets, we have a better management system for the targets countries are setting, and we have access to up-to-date knowledge about them. And also the Praise4 tools, although I haven't gone into much detail on them, you can use Praise4 to create spatially explicit information about the targets on a map and add new attributes to those targets. And next slide. Thank you. So I'm just going to come into the last part of the presentation now and look ahead to the next reporting process. So next slide. Thank you. So the first thing to say is that none of the work we've presented so far on tools and data would be possible without globally agreed standards. And indeed, I'd like to champion the work here of the Working Group 2 of GEO-LDN, who've led the establishment of minimum data quality standards. And these standards were first established in 2018, but they're now being updated in line with new requirements for reporting. And they're also adding in technical standards for the GEO-LDN toolbox. And we also worked with international standards organizations such as the ISO and OGC on using existing standards, as well as the creation of new ones. So for example, with OGC, we're assessing the feasibility of an encoding standard for the UNCCD reporting data structure, which has been co-developed with Trends.Earth for the 2022 reporting. So if adopted, this standard would mean that software developers who want to be in this federation of tools could adopt it for their software and for their data outputs to be then used for national reporting, and could be migrated to Praise easily. So I think just to wrap this up, this slide, ultimately what we want to ensure really is that our vision for a wider ecosystem of tools is that they're enabled by standards-based interoperable content, tools, and APIs. Next slide. Thank you. So what we see as this process is becoming more data-driven is that country expectations are evolving, and we need to constantly keep up pace and research new requirements and adapt. So there's a broad set of requirements looking ahead, and I think I couldn't go through them all here, but just to give you a brief overview, we're working on the improvements and refinements to the indicator methodologies with technical partners. We're working with colleagues at the United Nations Statistics Division to accommodate their requirements when we will submit the next submit SDG Indicator in 2026. We're conducting a formal requirements analysis for the next reporting based on feedback received from our stakeholders. And those requirements that necessitate a COP mandate need to be brought forward to our next COP, which is taking place this time next year. And we're currently drafting those as policy decisions. And finally, probably one of the key lessons learned from the reporting is that we need to engage countries as early as possible so that they can make the necessary preparations on time and submit a good report. Next slide, thank you. So one of the lessons learned from the analysis we did for CRIC 21 was that it is really difficult to produce a comprehensive and complete global and regional analysis of all the indicators, because as you can see from these regional maps for degraded land, where countries in grey did not report, there are actually large gaps in our knowledge base, depending on the region. So if we want to use these reported data for global assessments, we would need to find ways to fill these gaps using available global data sources for a more complete picture. Anticipating, okay, so next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So there are challenges ahead. Again, probably too many to mention here, but just a few I'll discuss. So as our indicators are heavily reliant on a continuous time series of Earth observations, we must ensure that they are continuously produced and consistently produced over a time series, so that our indicators are measurable over time. And we've already published this message via GEO to CIOS, so that space agencies are aware. The UNCCD reporting infrastructure is growing, as you've seen, and it is a challenge to ensure the software is funded and well-resourced in the long term. We also see challenges to the application of our indicators in some regional geographies. So in particular, small island developing states, mountainous regions, or hyper-arid areas. And we are actively working with our technical experts in the regions to resolve these challenges, as well as our data providers. Other challenges arise from lack of capacity at country level to keep up with the demands of a data-driven reporting process, global geopolitical change, as well as the rise of these so-called frontier technologies, such as artificial intelligence. Okay, so I think with that, I conclude the talk. On this slide, you're just seeing a very brief animation again of the dashboard, just to show you where the feedback page is. And we'd really appreciate if you would, have a look at the dashboard, give us some feedback on how you think it could be improved. And there's a dedicated feedback page there. So I hope you found the presentation informative and useful, and it's given you an insight into how the data revolution has transformed national reporting, and that you now have an idea what we're aspiring to achieve in the future. So with that, thank you, and back to you, Lena.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Brian. You both deserve a big round of applause. I will do mine through emojis in order not to make too